The tendency in this life is that for most human beings, that when they hear that somebody's been laid off or they're having a hard time, is they run from them.
Mm.
I don't want to be around that person. They're gonna probably ask me for money and they need stuff, and I don't really want to be. I don't want to be involved. That's the wrong attitude to have. The right attitude is to run to them and to help them and to hold their hand and to encourage them,
Right.
and to help be resourceful. Don't just say, "Man, I'm sorry, I don't have a job," but think with them about what they might next do.
I'm Garrick Francis. This is the Inheritance to Income podcast, where we help families, founders, and leaders prepare people and systems, not just assets, for what's next. I'm your legacy advocate. Let's talk about it. Today, I am honored to be joined by my guest, Joe Watkins. Joe is the host of State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. He's worked in the White House, he's worked in academia, in business, he's a media communicator, a little bit of an actor, and just plays a number of roles. He's a father, a pastor, a caregiver. He's had so many opportunities to pour into other people's lives that I'm just honored that he'd be able to join me here today. And full disclosure, we're cousins. It's a funny story that we didn't meet until I was around 18 years old. So welcome to Inheritance to Income, Joe.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Gary. It's great to be with you.
That's great. So jumping right into it, first question I like to ask, this series is called What Comes After Success. So the first question I want to ask you is, at what point in your life did you realize you had become a success and that you had achieved success?
Well, that's a very good question. Success is a very interesting and elusive thing because,
Mm.
as we know in this life, everything's transitory. So everything's for the time being. So your life is, if you want to look at it, may consist of a lot of small or sometimes larger or big successes and failures too, because there's failure intertwined with success. It's not, you don't get someplace without effort and sometimes struggle and sometimes failure and difficulty. But that being said, I've been blessed my whole life with periods where I achieved what I had wished to achieve, or maybe even excelled whatever I thought I might be able to do. It's everything is for the moment in this life, as we both know.
Mm.
If you get to be a wealthy person, if you get to be CEO of a company, which I've been blessed to be able to do. It doesn't end there, because once you get there, I mean, people will laud you, will praise you for having attained that position, and will look up to you and will invite you to give speeches and the like. But at the end of the day, once you get there and you have that position, you've got lots of responsibility, and then you realize suddenly that somebody under you, which is everybody, all your employees, is an employee somewhere under you that you may not know, who could be the cause for you being fired, or removed, or having to step down from your position. Somebody might do something wrong that you don't even personally know, but that's in your organization. So once you get to be the CEO of an organization, you realize there's tremendous responsibility that comes with it. And it really behooves you to be humble and to talk to the people that work for you, because they're the people that make it possible for your company to perform well. And you gotta treat them the way you want to be treated, and love them like you would love yourself. Love your neighbor like you love yourself,
Yes.
and then you have a shot at having continued success. But in this life there are always challenges. So
Mm.
you reach one plateau, and then there's another challenge. You're in high school and you get to the college of your choice, you succeed. Yeah, and then when you get there, you realize, well, now I've got to succeed here. And what does it mean to succeed here in college? How do I take advantage of all my opportunities and use my talents in a
Mm.
wise way and not waste the time, because it goes by faster than you think. And then you finish college, and if you go to graduate school, or if you go into the workforce, you have to be thinking again, like, well, so I succeeded. I finished college, and maybe I did well in college, but now I'm here in the world of work. How do I succeed? What do I do to be great where I am, even if I'm starting at the bottom? How do I show up every day ready to be great at what I am, to use my talents? And oftentimes, no matter what kind of a role you have, what really makes for greatness is your capacity to solve problems,
Mm.
and help people. And
Yeah. Yeah.
to the degree that you can identify problems and then solve them, makes you really valuable in an organization, wherever that might be, whatever sector that might be in.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Inheritance to Income. where we help families, founders, and leaders prepare for what's next. Hit that like and subscribe button and share this with a family member or colleague who you think it would help. That'll help this message travel because inheritance has to come with instructions. Now let's get back in. That's awesome. One of the things that you said, and I've always admired, is you were a CEO, you were an accomplished athlete in college, you're a pastor, you're a leader in a number of different places. So when you think about having achieved success, how did you consider what came next after those periods of success in your life?
I became a Christian my sophomore year in college at the University of Pennsylvania, the great school that we both attended.
Go
Although
Quakers.
earlier than you, because since I'm your older cousin, you're kind of not to say that I'm your older cousin. And but I became a believer and a follower of Jesus in college, and so I just thought it was really important to always seek God's will for my life.
Mhm.
And I felt like there were lots of things I could do and do well, but I wanted to be where God wanted me to be, and I wanted to be used wherever He put me in a way that was pleasing to Him, because that's my ultimate success. Is the ultimate success is when you leave here, when your time here on the planet is done, is everybody's time will be done at some point. And then you stand before your maker, and your maker says, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of your master. You did a great job while you were there. You followed my son, Jesus. You loved your neighbor like you loved yourself. You genuinely cared about people. You used all the talents, all the gifts that I gave you, and you helped a lot of folks along the way, and you were kind and generous. And all the things that the scriptures talk about what is required of us as followers of the master. And so I always wanted to be prayerful about what the next thing for me was, because at least for me, you never arrive. You're always in the process of and for a lot of great people in life, people who've been successful in very human and monetary terms, they don't stop. You look at a guy like Ken Chenault, who was able to become the president and CEO and then the chairman of American Express, first person of color, first African American to do that. And after he stepped down and retired as the head of American Express, he went on to something else.
Right.
And so so even as a retired person, having had an extraordinarily successful career at American Express, here he is now in a new position as the chairman of another company, and still striving to do great things and using his talents, everything that he's learned along the way, to be able to help the people coming behind him and to also help his company, and to continue to add value every day. And I think that's kind of the way it's supposed to be, that as long as you're on the planet and God bless you to have life and you're reasonably healthy, you're supposed to be doing something. You retired from your work, you had an extraordinary career, and you didn't just say, well, now it's just time to sit back on the porch and sip lemonade. Me and Sheila can sip lemonade every day and just think about all the accomplishments I had. No, you're using the gifts that God has given you to be a blessing to other people. You haven't stopped yet. You've got plenty ahead of you still. And look at what this has become, which is a real blessing. So I would advise anybody who feels like they've been successful and they've arrived to don't ever forget God. Jamie Foxx did a TV comedy special that was extraordinary, and after his illness, and he said the one mistake he made was he forgot about God.
Wow.
That's what he said. And I love that he was honest enough to say that. And he said, you can't do that. You can't forget who got you there, who blessed you to be able to have the opportunity and blessed you to be successful in terms of money and things, all of which, by the way, are for the time being, and we don't take them with us when we leave here. But they're nice to have if God blesses you to have them there. So it's certainly nice to be able to live where you want to live and how you want to live. And he said he forgot God, and I would tell people, don't ever forget the author and creator of the universe, who loves you and cares about you, and who made it possible for you to rise out of whatever your circumstances were to be who you are and where you are and to be doing what you're doing in a way that's makes you admired by the people around you.
No matter your height of your mountain or the depth of your valley, right?
That's
Because
correct.
that's the one constant. You said something in that statement. You said, as long as you were trying to be of value to people. Go a little deeper on that because how is that thread weave through what you have done, how you've mentored people, how you've talked to people in as they seek your advice on transitions? How does that concept of value to other people play into it?
Well, in a big way, it's interesting because for most people, they suppose that to be successful in a worldly sense, you've got to be really selfish. And it's actually the opposite, that the people that oftentimes end up doing really great things and succeeding are the people who are not necessarily selfish, but they really understand other people. And if you care about other people, boy, that's a huge value add, because I found in all the positions that I've had that my capacity to understand people, to understand problems, to be able to solve those problems because I genuinely cared about the people, even if it was a problem that didn't particularly concern me, but I found out about it, and I was in Alabama. My first job after Princeton Seminary, I was the chaplain at Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama, and I was working with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, yeah, as a volunteer. Since I was a chaplain at college, we went to some of their functions, and I was supporting them. And I learned in the process of supporting them about a young man named Tommy Lee Hines, who had been imprisoned for a rape that he hadn't committed because he physically couldn't commit it. He was mentally challenged, and so
Wow.
severely mentally challenged that he couldn't even perform the sex act. So he couldn't have done the rape, but nonetheless he was in jail for it, and we were trying to get him out. And the two lawyers that were there were two lawyers that were fighting over representing him, both African Americans, both in the South. And I read about that in Jet magazine, and so normally you think, well, you read about that and you say, oh, it's an interesting article. It's too bad that's happening. Well, I thought to myself, well, that's a terrible thing. Tommy Lee Hines is the real loser in all this because these two guys are both talented and they're fighting over representing him, and he's sitting in jail, wasting away. So I took it upon myself as the chaplain at the college to call both men, which I did. I invited them to come to the college one evening, without any fanfare. Nobody, no press was there. I invited him to sit. I asked the president if we could borrow his office. She said yes. And I brought the two men, the two lawyers, into the office. And I said to them, listen, this is terrible for Tommy Lee Hines. I know you both want to represent him, but we've got to hammer out tonight an agreement for one of you to represent Tommy and for the other to step aside so that for the sake of this young man. And it's only the right thing to do. And so we sat there for maybe an hour or so, but we got it figured out. And then at the end of our meeting, one of the lawyers said, you know what, I'll step aside and I'll let you do it. And Henry Sanders Mims was the lawyer who stepped aside, and U.W. Clement, who became a judge,
Hmm.
put the case on. And it got solved. And there wasn't any big article about it was solved,
Yeah.
but it got solved. And I was, and who knows that, but whoever's listening now, and
Right.
because it's not a story I ever told anybody. But at the end, I'm just trying to illustrate the fact that if God gifts you to be able to solve the problem, help people, try to fix stuff that you can fix, be a blessing to the people around. Don't just say, well, what am I going to get out of it? Like, what are you going to get? Well, what you get out of it is the blessing that God gives you, because God is able to bless you beyond whatever you think, and he's able to bless you as he's done for me. My whatever my trajectory in life has been, it's because God has been extraordinarily kind to me, and allowed me to come from abject poverty, leaving seminary, to one job after the other, to working for a U.S. senator, to
Yeah.
working for a university president, to working in the White House, and then to I worked for Whitney Houston afterwards, and then went into investment banking, and every one of those opportunities was God opened the door, God made it possible, and also I was just trying to help people. And
Yeah.
in the process of trying to help people, I got hired, and each job was better than the one before it. So if you have a servant's attitude, that'll really help you in your life. If you if you ask God to help you, say, Lord, I want to be a blessing to the people around me. How can you use me? How can you use my gifts? You'd be amazed at what God can do. I mean, he can do anything. I mean, how do I get to the White House, from when I'm in seminary, I'm working as a janitor and as an orderly, just to make ends meet because I have a scholarship. But at the time I had a scholarship, I didn't have enough money to provide for my family to pay for our rent and pay for food every day. And so I had to go to school full time and work full time as a janitor, as an orderly, as a groundskeeper, all these, what we would call menial jobs, but they were good jobs,
Yeah,
honestly.
they taught you something.
They taught me a great deal about serving
And
other people.
the people who you worked with, I'm sure, in the janitorial service, in the senator's office, the White House, the foundations, the businesses, there were people, I'm sure, whose names we will never know,
That's right.
who taught you something that you took with you to each next position.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
There was a guy when I worked at this as a janitor. My job was to empty the trash and to clean the bathrooms. I had to clean the toilets and the urinals and
Mhm.
everything. And we'd have a lunch break every day. I think I was doing this full time job during the summertime. So, but I was making enough money to be able to pay for groceries for my family and pay our rent, but I didn't have enough money to have lunch every day. So almost every day when I went there, I didn't have any lunch. And if I had a couple of quarters, I might go to the little vending machine and I would get myself a bar, a Hershey's bar or something,
That's right.
or some ice cream. If I could had 50 cents, I could get like, a nice, ice cream bar, and I would have.
Old school energy bar was like a Hershey bar and ice cream. A little
There
sugar
you
kept
go.
you going.
Yeah. But one day when I was sitting out with all the guys and I was just, I was talking, they would be fascinated because I was the only one that was in school and I would be telling them stuff. And one day one of the guys noticed that I never had lunch. And he asked me about it. He says, a guy named Otis, he said, "Where's your lunch, man?" Because everybody else had a lunch pail and they were eating as I was talking and I didn't have any lunch. And I said, "Oh, I'm fine." And he realized, that I was poor, I was broke, that I didn't have any money, and that that's why I was coming every day without lunch. And I remember he had a big thick sandwich, a big thick tuna fish sandwich on toasted bread, and it was like a really stuffed sandwich. And he looked, he says, "You don't have lunch?" I said, "Well, no, I don't have it today." And he just took his sandwich and he broke it in half,
Mm,
gave me half a sandwich. And I was just so thankful for that. And here it is, all these years later. That's the kindness I remember. I don't remember. He's the only name I remember from that place,
right.
because
Right.
he was so extraordinarily kind to me. He was kind enough to realize, that I was suffering, and he helped me.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how much he helped me, but he really helped me that day. And I remember that kindness, and that really helped me to remember, like help people.
Right.
When people ask you for help them. Don't give it lip service. Actually, try to help them. Somebody says, "Can you help me with such and such?" Even if somebody's on the street and they're asking for money for lunch, don't judge them. Don't try to psychoanalyze why they're homeless or they're not doing well. Don't label them, because you don't know what's happened to them in their life. Just
Exactly
have
right.
have mercy on them and love them and help them and give them. If you can buy them lunch, you know, buy them lunch since you're getting ready to have lunch, and you're on the street, going to a nice restaurant, to have lunch, buy them lunch or give them enough money to be able to get a nice lunch for themselves. But help folks because working people are hungry too. I was a
Exactly.
guy and I was hungry
Exactly.
that day.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing, when you seem, as you mentioned some of these things, um, you've seen people at their best or their highest. You've seen people at the highest levels of national and international government. You've also seen the impact that things can have on people that's disruptive in their lives. So as a leader, as a counselor, as a mentor, as a pastor, when people have these types of disruptions like we're seeing now, people getting laid off in their 50s or people having difficult times in current situations, how do you help people go through, or what types of things have helped you, or what types of things are things that you would kind of counsel people to think about as they are facing that disruption and looking to get to the other side?
Well, I would say it's wonderful to have people that you can count on that you can talk to, who will talk to you. The tendency in this life is that for most human beings, is that when they hear that somebody's been laid off or they're having a hard time, is they run from them.
Mm,
I don't want to be around that person. They can probably ask me for money and they need stuff, and I don't really want to be. I don't want to be involved. That's the wrong attitude to have. The right attitude is to run to them and to help them and to hold their hand and to encourage them,
right.
and to help be resourceful. Don't just say, "Man, I'm sorry, I don't have a job," but think with them about what they might next do, how they might next find their next opportunity, and then try to point them to it. Maybe you know somebody that can help them. Maybe you know somebody in the area where they have expertise that they can find useful. There's a guy that I was pumping gas one day just a few months ago, and a guy recognized me since I've done some TV work in my time. And he said, "I'm one of your neighbors." And I said, "Oh, nice to meet you." We shook hands. And he was pumping gas also. And so I asked him, I said, "So what do you do?" He says, "Well, I'm an accountant." I said, "So
Hmm.
where do you work?" He says, "Well, I'm in between jobs right now because I got laid off where I am, and I'm in my 50s, and I don't know where my next opportunity
Hmm.
is going to be." And I said, what are you doing about it? He said, "Well, I'm trying." I said, so there was somebody that I knew. I had a friend, and I said, "You know what? I've got a friend who runs a firm." I said, "And I don't know if he's got room to hire you, but he certainly, one, it'd be great for him to consider you, and two, he would certainly know of other people in his orbit, in his field, that might have a need for somebody with your talents." I said, I said, "Yeah, let's exchange numbers," which we did. And then I said, "Let me give you the number of this guy, and you call my friend and tell him that I told you to call, and then tell him what's going on with you, and
Wow.
see what happens with that." Just try to help folks. Don't like blow people off, or have the attitude. Well, if somebody says, "I got laid off," say, "No, sorry to hear that," and then keep going. Find out what they need and see if you can help them. And at the very least, you can pray for them. Genuinely pray for them. I mean, I don't
Genuinely.
mean say I'll pray for you, which people say all the time, but genuinely, maybe while you're there talking to them, say, "Can we have some prayer together?" And you just bow
Hmm.
your heads and pray together, and ask God to 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 intervene in the situation. The scripture is absolutely right when it says I guess Proverbs, the third chapter, there's a verse that says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart
Oh,
and lean not to your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will make your paths straight." And that's true. If you just trust in the Lord and don't question him, and don't like be mad all the time about stuff just because everything doesn't go our way, because things will oftentimes not go your way. But if you can just trust in the Lord and realize that he's bigger than whatever your challenge is, and lean not to your own understanding, which is, "Oh, I guess I'm sunk, I can never get another job, I'm out of it, I can't." Just lean not to your own understanding, but trust the Lord, and then continue to acknowledge him in all your ways. So live a life that looks like a Christian life, and then tell people what God has done for you. Don't say, "Yeah, man, I made it, I'm successful, I'm making this
right.
much money."
Yeah. Don't beat your own chest. Yeah.
Right. You don't beat your own chest and blow your own horn. You say, "God's been good to me," and you give God the glory and the honor, for wherever it is that you are,
Yeah.
and you thank him for it. And you tell other people that, just like I'm telling everybody now listening, anywhere and everywhere I've been is because of the good grace of God.
Right.
Because I'm not much, but I'm an example of how much God can do with a person that isn't very much. You know, See, they,
One of the things that I love, Joe, and again, just having seen your career once I met you and got to know you, is that, and one thing I've learned just from watching you is that I would describe you as relational, not transactional. And so when you think about, and I focus sometimes on talking to people about what are your gaps, right? As you go through this life, do you have a relationship gap? Do you have what are the gaps that you're falling into? And so I would think, from what I've seen and learned watching you, in the Senate with the senator and with the president of Penn at the time, with President Bush and with others, and even with, as you even on Sundays when you're doing your broadcast, um, you take time to mention people as they come on. It seems to me that you have what has helped you grow has been the fact that you have focused on relationships and not transactions, even though you've been in finance.
that's right. I would hope that that's true about me, and I think it's important for everybody. You're supposed to care about other people. This is what it means to love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's not just a phrase in the Bible. It's not just a casual scripture employ when you feel like it. But if God's spirit is in you, you follow his son and God's spirit is in you. You got to care about other people the way you care about yourself. And if that's the case, then, like if you're preaching, you're not just talking to a crowd, you're talking to individuals, and the hope is that you're meeting their need, that that whatever the good Lord has given you or gifted you to say that day is helpful to somebody that's listening. And so, yeah, when I see the names that pop on when I'm doing my little thing on Facebook on Sunday mornings when I'm preaching for the 10 minutes or so.
Maybe a little thing, but it's a big blessing.
Oh, you're kind, cuz you're kind. But yeah, I know all the folks, and everybody matters, and everybody's going through different stuff, at different times. And the idea is to be there for everybody. You laugh with your friends, you cry with them, you comfort them, you encourage them. All these things are important to do, and people matter. So everywhere I've gone, I've kind of accumulated like a vast. I've stayed friendly with everybody I've ever worked with or gone to school with, that's quite a crowd these days,
That's a
but
big crowd, yeah.
but it's important. It's a wonderful thing, when you meet people, it's just a wonderful thing, I mean, I was so excited when, I found that we were cousins
Yeah.
way back when, in the 1980s at Penn, and we had the same blood in us and everything.
Celebrating our Antiguan and Barbudan heritage.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I love that. Gary
Yeah.
Hodrington Francis, my cousin.
Hodrington Francis, the village my dad was born in.
That's there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I just love it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Inheritance to Income. A lot of people have built something meaningful, a business, a career, a family responsibility, a body of wisdom, but they're not clear what it should make possible. That's what I call the legacy deployment gap. At Francis Legacy Bridge Partners, we help you name the gap, clarify what needs attention, and identify the right next step before transition becomes urgent. To explore a legacy deployment gap call, visit francislbp.com. The link is in the show notes below. You built it. Now let's clarify what comes next. Now let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah.
So let me go one other place here, a couple other things. And this is a bridge where I hope it's okay for me to go, because I my aunt lived until very late in her life, but as she lived there, she had some challenges. And so our roles in life tend to reach the highest heights of leadership, but then there's the family.
Yeah.
And there's the roles that I often talk about how we inherit responsibilities sometimes before we were ready, or before we thought things were going to happen, or people have to take on extra roles, even though they're working and they're doing all these other things. And I know, my mom, as my aunt was having some issues, she became a caregiver, and it was nothing she was trained to do except in her heart. And I know you are a caregiver.
Yeah,
a lot of people, but specifically.
Yeah. My wife was diagnosed about 6 years ago with early onset Alzheimer's disease, and I suspected even before that there were some cognitive issues because she was such a smart, sharp person, and she seemed to not be able to remember as well, and a little bit foggy on issues that she'd been really easy for her before. And by the time she was diagnosed, I think she was already well on her way, and now she's at a point where she can't feed herself or dress herself, or do it or walk without assistance, or climb stairs without great assistance and the like. And I tell her every day that I love her, and I'm there to help her. I tell her, you don't have to worry about a thing, even if you don't know my name. That I love you. More importantly, God loves you. And I said, and you don't have to worry, because I'm going to take care of you. Everything's covered. I said, I'm going to make sure you eat today, and that you're happy, and you're having a good time, and whatever you need, just tell me what you need, and I'm here to try to get it for you. And happily, I told you I was an orderly for some of my time when I was at Princeton Theological Seminary, and I didn't realize how that work would help me later on in life. But I learned to care for older people as an orderly. I was getting paid to do that. I learned how to change them and how to wash them and dress them and everything, and how to genuinely care for folks. And it's coming really handy because I'm able to now do that for my wife, um, uh, maybe in a way that others might not be able to because I did it once for a living. And so I really understand, the sensitivities and how she feels. And I work hard to encourage her because even though she can't really respond or it may look like she's not listening, she can listen. She hears and understands what I'm saying, what people around me are saying, what our kids are saying. And now we've got a woman that comes in a couple days a week that helps me. But I'm still working too. I'm working
Right.
AI company, which is very exciting. But at the same time, I'm my wife's caregiver, and taking care of her and bringing her with me when we have Zoom meetings. Oftentimes, she's sitting like right next to me, but off
Yeah.
off camera, and she's listening. And as soon as we get done, like I'll feed her, and
Right.
we'll just sit together.
It's
I'll play.
amazing. I just have such respect for that, Joe. And but I think it helps a lot of people that it's a challenging thing to talk about for a lot of people. And you said it, you are working a job, you are a full-time caregiver, you are, a lot of people depend on you and rely on you for a lot of things. And so when you think about that, um, what for people who are in that same type of a situation as they, especially folks who are kind of coming out of a career and they're trying to figure out this next 20 or 30 years, since we're all living longer now, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, as my folks should say. um, who do you depend on, or how do you as a leader, how do lead people who have been in these leadership roles and find themselves with all these different things going on? Obviously we depend on God, but who are the people in your circle who give you support?
My kids. So
Mhm.
one of my kids, my daughter Courtney, left her job just to be an additional caregiver for her mother and me, which is wonderful. So she's been extraordinarily helpful and supportive, and my other two children as well have been. They're a little bit further away distance wise, which makes it, but all three of them are engaged with us almost every day, which is wonderful. Now
Mhm.
that we have FaceTime and these other great technologies, we're able to, and texting, we're able to literally talk almost every day, usually by FaceTime, and then
Wow.
but also in between the time by text message and the like, and then by phone if we need to. But
Oh,
we just encourage each other because my wonderful wife is their sweet mommy. She's their mother,
yeah.
and so we all have to deal with the fact that she's gone. But we know that the scriptures tell us there's a season for everything.
Everything.
And that none of us are here forever. For us, I say to my kids and also to myself, rather than complain, I say, isn't it kind that God has given us kind of a soft landing, a chance to
Mhm.
say goodbye over time, to see her as she slowly leaves, to tell her how much we love her and care about her, and to see her off into the next life, in a way that's that's helpful to her and also helpful to us. So we celebrate her life all the time, and we still laugh with her. And I'm silly, and I tell her jokes and make her laugh. Even still,
Yeah.
and I thank God for every day that He gifts us
Yeah.
together. But I know that it'll end, and when it ends, there's a life after this life, and
Mhm.
and what we do in this life has a great deal to do with where we go after this life. I'm always amazed that really smart people don't consider the fact that it's just like everything else in your life. Like, if you do well in grade school, then you can go to a good high school. Then you do well in high school, then you have the option to go to college, or some kind of other, technical school. And if you do well there, then you have a chance to go into an industry and do well, right? But everything is dependent upon your performance, like, how you're
Mhm.
doing, how you're acting, what you consider to be your priorities. And we all know that there's a life after this life. You get a chance to really think about it a lot when you have a loved one, somebody who you love so dearly, who is sick and who's heading toward a defined end. And you get to think about that all the time. And you say, well, how am I living? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing everything that the scriptures expect of me, that God expects of me? Am I being the person that I would want somebody to be for me if it was me in that position?
That's
And
beautiful.
that's I'm thankful more than anything else. I don't complain because whatever your situation is, just remember it could always be worse.
Yeah, yeah,
Be
yeah.
thankful for what you have. I have a TV show that comes on Christian television, and anybody can find it on YouTube called Joe Watkins State of Independence. And my producers find all these incredible people to talk with. Many of them are not famous.
Mm,
But they're people who are doing incredible things where they are. And you hear about the difficulty for people in other parts of the world,
mm,
the living conditions, the annual income. I talked to a guy who's working in a country where the annual income is $31 a year.
wow.
$31 a year is what
Year.
people. That's why they don't live very long,
Yeah.
and anything can take you out. A cold, a cut, anything can be the end of your life there. And I said, boy, doing the interviews has made me ever so more thankful because here I am, I'm blessed. If I would complain to God, as sometimes I have to confess I do in my prayer life, you know I have to always quickly say, Lord, forgive me for complaining, because look at this, look at where you've gifted me to be, what you've allowed me to have, you know even when I've been the times when I've been hungry, that doesn't compare with the people who are
Right,
starving
right,
in other
right.
parts of the world who are living on one meal a day.
Yeah,
Whereas for us it may be an option because you're trying to lose weight, but in other parts of the world, you may get one meal a day, and that's a good thing. You're doing well if you have one meal a day.
yeah,
So I say, Lord, I have nothing to complain about. I'm thankful. I'm
yeah,
thankful. Help me to be a blessing. Help me to use the resources you've given me wisely, and to be kind with them, not be
yeah.
selfish. You know, and that's how I live every day. And I would counsel other people to have that same attitude as well toward
That's a
God.
beautiful attitude, and it's a legacy. I mean, I know my I used to call them my little cousins. They're no longer little anymore, and they have little ones who aren't little anymore. But and obviously when I met you, and I got the bonus of Steph and all the kids and everybody else who were supporting it. But it's a beautiful legacy, and I think one of the things that I see that you've been intentional about is sharing your values with your children and your children's children, and that's legacy building.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love what you're saying in your series. I think it's so very important. And the way you build legacy is you talk to your kids and your grandkids. Like, so my kids and my grandkids, they're always asking me questions, and I'm telling them everything. I want them to know about my experiences so that, don't you want the people coming behind you who you love
Right.
to miss the pitfalls, not make the mistakes you've made,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, to have some extra advantage, the advantage of what you've done, and to know how to get there without, running into a brick wall or having a bad fall. And so, yeah, I'm talking to them all the time about everything. And I say, let's think about the future. Where you're headed. What do you want to do? And then, what about our family? What things
Mm.
and what are you thinking about, in terms of your career and where you want to be, and realizing that you could end up being like me with a bunch of different careers. You could
Mm.
be in education and healthcare and in the investment industry and TV and ministry. You can be in all kinds of different things, or movies, like the few little movies I've been in for a half a second.
Yeah.
But you can be in all that's possible for you, because with God all things are possible anyway. But it's great to be thinking about it, and to
Be intentional.
be
Yeah.
intentional to
Be
just
intentional about it. I mean, and for a lot of people, we know, we're fortunate that we know something of where we come from. Our island side. I know my North Carolina side. Another thing I shared with your lovely wife is, the
because she
North
said North Carolina.
the North Carolina roots. Raleigh and New Bern, not that far apart.
Right.
And just we know a little bit about where we come from, but I think that's really important to share and to ground us and to help us consider what comes next because we know what came before.
Yeah. Yes.
You
Yes.
know,
Yeah. I think it's critically important, and I love the fact that you're really helping people with the work that you're doing now. Because it's so helpful for people to know and to understand. Sadly, there are lots of people who just kind of like go from day to day and don't really think about much. They just kind of react to stuff as it happens to them. And you're teaching people to really be thoughtful and intentional about things. which I think is just a real gift.
Well,
So
one of the things that I was taught, like you were mentioning about people's perspectives and understanding other countries and knowing where where people come from and their struggles. My granddad, Charles Irving, used to always say, I felt bad because I had no shoes. So I looked down and saw a man who had no feet, right? And so he used to always say those types of things to me, and so those little sayings. And now you talk about speaking with your kids and grandkids. I keep encouraging people to use social media for family media, to take time to record messages for their great grandchildren or to speak to their grandchildren and record it, and you have your show, and so people will be able to see it, but they'll be able to see and hear you. They'll be able to see and hear Steph, the way she was, the way she is, the way she contributed, and the way everybody did things. And so I think that's an important use of you're in now in the medium and acting and television and doing different things. So how do you, for people who are looking at this opportunity to podcast or to do new media or to do new content, how do you think we all should look at content creation, especially say post 55?
right. I think that everything you're saying is right on point. I think now that we have the gift of all this technology, we ought to be thoughtful and intentional about how we use it, and we should use it in a way to uplift and encourage our friends, also to help them, let them know what's going on with us. I mean, you can let people know a lot about what's going on with you now that we all have. We all have our own, media centers in these
That's
things.
right. That's right.
You can let people know. You can put it on Instagram or Facebook, or you can create a podcast and ask people questions. My granddaughter's boyfriend is a wonderful young man, Kofi King, and he graduated from Columbia University a couple of years ago, and has always wanted to be in film, and he's directed a movie that I'm actually in. I have yet another bit role, although this time. This time I'm not a newscaster, like in Zero Day I played
You're
a
not
Fox News.
typecast, huh?
I'm not typecast as a newscaster. So I'm just a guy. I'm an old guy, outside of a building, and the main character is telling me not to go in the building, and I'm telling him I'm going in that building, and that's my little role, my little 30-second role. But he created something else, a vehicle called Narrative, which is a wonderful vehicle. And Narrative, what he does is, for a fee, he will come to your house,
Mhm.
and he'll have you gather up all your old photos and other stuff, and then he'll interview you,
Wow.
and maybe some of your family members too, and ask you, to kind of take me through your life,
Yeah.
and so you do an interview with them for maybe an hour or so, and then he puts it into like a
Right.
film about your life, like an autobiography of
Yeah.
you in your own words,
Yeah. That's
but on
great.
film, which is really cool. And so
Yeah.
he did that with me, and I got to talk about, I went to boarding school, and this is how I got here, and this is where I grew up as a kid, and this is the neighborhood I lived in, and this is what how many brothers and sisters I had, and cousins, and aunts and uncles, and so on and so forth. And this is where I went to college, and this is what I did while I was there, and then after college is what I did, and it just kind of a run through of my whole life, which is getting to be long now because I'm old. So
No, that's awesome. And it's similar, Reese, we thought Reese does all my
Reese is so
he
talented.
does all my tech work and video and photography, Reese Francis Studios. And similarly, we've talked about he did a lot of filming for my mom some years before she passed away for documentary. And we've talked about that same concept of having, Reese Francis Studios do these legacy documentaries for people, because it's so important for people to preserve their words, their images, their faces, to see who you were, how you looked, what you did. It's a gift that's been given to us, by God, to be able to use these technologies for the right purpose.
That's exactly right. And people should take it full advantage. I know I do. I'm always trying to, and I'm looking with an intentional eye, and also a critical eye toward, how can I do it better? Like even in my TV show, how can I decrease me and increase the person that I'm talking to? My show's not about me. My name is on the show, and I'm the only constant. But every week it's me talking to somebody who's really fascinating,
Mm.
and my job is to bring that out of the person, so that everybody watching can be fascinated as I am.
Yeah.
about what this person has done or what they've gone through, and how it shaped their lives. But I'm always thinking about, critically about how can I improve it? How can I use this medium? And my granddaughter, who's my oldest granddaughter, who's gone into fashion, she's like a genius, and she creates all this. I mean, she creates clothing and boots and jackets and blouses, and she's been doing wedding dresses for people.
Hmm.
I mean, she's just fabulous and incredible. And I was telling her, and she's got me now where I'm reading more and watching podcasts more, and so I've learned that my style of dress has a name to it, and there are podcasts and videos on YouTube about it, and they call it Black Ivy. So it's Black Ivy League,
Yeah. Yeah.
Ivy League dress, Ivy League, and these are the people that, the Ivy League style of dress, which you know all too well, being an Ivy Leaguer yourself, you and your brother, and and preppy. But it's Black Preppy, Black Ivy League, and so I've been getting all interested and excited about that, and I've been compiling photos from her from my different over the years of different outfits that I was photographed in that that fit that category.
Yeah, you've been says yeah. You look back and you think about how I guess you're right.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah.
categories often are not done in advance; they're done when you look back on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, let me ask you this question. I always kind of, as we get to the end of it, I like to ask people. So after all the successes that you've had and all the wonderful things you've been able to do, um, what is it that you now feel called to do?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So I'm asking God that precise thing every day. Right now. So the thing that I'm doing now and that I'm excited about is my work in AI, physical AI, with this company, Kaylee AI, and it's been absolutely exciting, and it's a lot of work, but it's great work, and it's great to be working with young people
Yeah.
who are on the cutting edge of technology, and to learn about it and not be afraid of it, but to learn about how it can be helpful and help people. Our kind of AI, physical AI, provides connectivity for in places where you can't get it, which is so
Mm.
critical and important. So it has great uses for like emergency management. When people are stuck someplace and need to be found or rescued. And the list goes on of what it can do. So it can be a wonderfully useful thing. But I enjoy doing that, and when I'm in a business or an industry, I try to learn everything I can about it so that I can add value while I'm there. So I was CEO of a healthcare system for a while. I was CEO of a school district for a while. So along with working for a university president, as you know, at the University of Pennsylvania, our alma mater, I worked for a U.S. senator. I worked for a U.S. president in the White House, and traveled around the country for him. I worked for a superstar singer, Whitney Houston, and traveled around the world with her. And it was a fascinating opportunity. And it was just extraordinary. One of her brothers wrote to me on my website for Joe Watkins State of Independence. My producer said, "Hey, look, you got somebody sent a comment in the comment box," and it was Michael Houston, Whitney's brother, with whom I spent a lot of time when I was working with Whitney. He wrote me a very, very nice note about his sister, saying, "Our family loved you," which was so wonderful and nice.
Yeah.
And he knows that I love them too, all of them. But what am I looking forward to? I'm still preaching. I preach on Facebook. I get invited to preach at people's churches, and I just say, Lord, however it is you wish to take me, and use me as you continue to grow me.
Mhm.
In the business that I'm in now, oftentimes people work in the business with an eye toward a final outcome. I know when I was I was a partner in an investment firm. I had that same idea in mind, which is at some point, if we didn't get acquired by a bigger company, I might want to sell my shares back to the company and cash
Right.
out. And then you got to figure out, so what do you do though after you cash out? And the same is true in this business where there's so much acquisition going on in the AI space that it's very possible that our company at some point could be acquired by by a bigger entity. And
Wow.
what would I do at that point? I would do whatever, wherever it is God sends me, whatever He would have me to do, whether, however He would have me use my talents and all the experiences that I've had in government and politics and television and healthcare and education and banking and entertainment, all that, and ministry, most importantly. However God would have me use that, that's what I'm doing next. And I don't, whether He puts me in a job where I'm doing something in politics again or in government, so be it. If it means that I'm actually in a physical church somewhere, so be it. If it means that I'm ministering in some other kind of way, not in the church, but I'm doing some kind of ministry, uh, so be it. Whether maybe I'm doing philanthropic work, uh, maybe I'm doing more TV stuff. Somebody said, like, if the time comes for you to be a bachelor again, maybe you could be the golden bachelor, be on the gold. Well, I don't know about that.
Hey, there's a leading man. You've been not just a supporting actor. You've been a leading man in a lot of roles. So, but no, I think that's fantastic, Joe. And again, it's why I wanted to have you on the show to share a lot of your wisdom and your knowledge and your passion and your civility and your service. And Joe, again, I think what is most, I think, learned for people is that you are a man of family, a man of faith, a man who is led for purpose, and that you have always thought about how to serve people, how to be of value to people, and that is what, if you do those things, then God will put you in the places where He needs you and where He wants you to be of use to other people. And so there's no such thing as retirement in that. There's deployment. Where's the next deployment that God has for me? Where's the next purpose for my life to go? And I think there's a lot for people to learn in that. How do people talk about how do I live a purpose-driven life, but you have demonstrated that, and you have been an example of that for other people around you. So I think it's a blessing. I'm encouraged by every word you have for us and to follow where that goes. And I'm encouraged by watching your family grow and the people whose lives you have poured into over the years and will continue to do for years. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me on Inheritance to Income and for pouring into people who have the ability to watch.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's been a pleasure being with you, cuz I love you. I love the work you're doing right now. You're doing an awesome job, and love to you and Sheila and the kids. And
Thank you.
and tell Charles I said hey too.
I'll do it. So again, thank you for joining me on Inheritance to Income. I don't take it for granted that you took this time to spend with us. God bless.
God bless.